Hi, good evening. I'm David Boyajian. I'm the drawing instructor at Lenox Community College, and I'm going to do a demo drawing tonight on self-portraits. So I have a mirror set up here on this one, right? Lower one's mirror set up looking back at me. Top one is the camera on me that I'm talking to, as well as the mirror, so you get that. And then I've got the drawing page down here. I'm going to do the portrait on. So just to give you an intro into the portrait drawing, a lot of this is really about scale and proportion, right? Scale of the head, size of the head, proportion of the body, right? So if you look at this elevation of the head here from top to bottom, right? And then also going from this side here, right? Outer ear to outer ear. So what you can do, that distance from shoulder to here, out the shoulder, you should be able to get 3 heads from the outer point of the shoulder. All right, scale and proportion. Scale and proportion of the head is like 8 heads to the overall length of the body. So the head is sort of like the canon of proportion that you're looking at for the whole figure, if you were doing the whole figure, but tonight we're just going to do the head down to the shoulder clavicle. So clavicle being here, right? Sternum point coming down here, looking at that. So that's your sternum, gives you a collarbone out to the tips of your shoulders this way. You know, strong muscle group coming down here, sternum mastoid. Mastoid process behind the ear, back down to the sternum clavicle point. Okay, so a good way to do this and setting up the scale and proportion of the head. So if you take 4 fingers, right? So if you go 4 fingers from your hairline, right, to your brow, there you got 4, okay? And then if you look from the brow line to the top of the head, the high point of the head, you got another 4, okay? And then you have 4 more coming down from the brow line to the tip of the nose, and from the bottom of the nose to the chin, you got 4 more. Now, from the bottom of the chin to the center of the neck, Adam's apple. 4, and then from the Adam's apple down to your clavicle, you got 4 more. So this distance here is equal to this distance here. It's equal to this distance here. So that's thirds. 1, 2, 3. Scale and proportion, you can establish that and set that up as well. So that's important to know. Now, if you take the 4 fingers and you go from the inside corner of the eye, the outer corner of the eye, you got 4 fingers. Here. Outer corner of the eye to the front of the ear, you got 4 fingers. Gives you the sense of scale and proportion and distance that you break that around, right? Facet points this way. If you go from the top of the ear to the bottom of the ear, it's 4 fingers. And if you look at that this way, you bring that right around here. Brow line to the tip of the nose. So you know where the relationship of the ear is right through here. So if you take your 4 fingers, center line, here, that's split line, center line of the eyes. Okay? Here. And that comes down corner of the mouth. So center of the eye is also corner of the mouth. If you look at the tear duct here, that tear duct lines up with the outer portion of the nostril here and then here. Center line of the eye, corner of the mouth, center line of the eye, corner of the mouth, right? There you go. If you look at this point here, bring this around, bottom of the ear, here, bottom of the ear, here. Brow line, top of the ear, brow line, top of the ear. So if you're looking from here up to that point, you can see that this distance comes straight across above the ears, and then coming down below the ears here, you got 4 fingers. So that's where you're located. So that's going to help you out with this drawing demo. All right, so now, if you're laying out this drawing and then proceeding through with it, If you look at the shape of the head is egg shaped. All right, larger on the top, comes down into here, neckline comes down. You got a center line coming through, and then you got scale and proportion. All right, so if you're here and you go, that's the top of my head, right? That's going to get me to the hairline here. And then this is going to get me to the brow line here, working on that curve. Curve's going this way. Very important. Projection of that curve, right? Here. So, top of the head, hairline to brow line to tip of the nose. So I'm going to reverse this curve because when I'm looking at this here, it's curving this way. These are curving this way. There's a reverse curve here. Tip of the nose. And then coming down into the chin, 4 more fingers here. Okay, so if I was to do a center line here, create a symmetrical form, left and right, I can drop that in, right? And that's going to help me to establish the bridge structure of the nose right there. Now the split line of the mouth, go a little bit more down here, is at that halfway point here, all right? So if you look center line of the eye, split line of the mouth, center line of the eye, split line of the mouth, it's going to give you center of the eye, split line of the mouth. Coming down into this piece here. So if I look at the neckline here, comes from behind the ear, at the jaw point here, coming down this way. So if I bring this in, if I go large to small this way, create that structure of that egg shape here, that's going to help you to establish that, right? So we also know that the ears are from here, brow line, to the bottom of the nose, all right? So into here, that's your ear, right there. So we know that that neckline is going to come down from here, right? So if I go from the bottom of the chin, that's like my Adam's apple, and then 4 more, that gets me down to my clavicle here. And it comes up this way, splits like that. Neck shoulder line coming from that halfway point, I would say here. I would go from here, and then you can come out like that. And that's going to establish that shoulder line for that head. So that gives you a pretty good indication as to where you are. So to keep those ears from sticking out too far, I would go narrower, pull that in, that shape right there. Now, so let's talk about structure of light and shadow coming in on this. Okay. So anything that's projected or coming out, earlobes, those are your high points. So that's going to pick up light. So anything that projects out off a form or an object is going to grab light. Anything that's within a recess, cavity of the eye here, cavity of the eye here, nostrils, split line of the mouth, below the lower lip, and then underneath the chin, and then also inside the ears are going to be a value change. And it's probably going to be your darker value. Your gray tone points are going to be side of the head, temporal lobe. Slight indication. Not as deep as the eyes, a little bit less, right? Side of the face coming into here, right? That's creating shadow. That's light. That's the projected edge. The jawline is illuminated. The cheekbone is illuminated. This is the value change or shadow. Upper lip, right? It's a shadow point. It's cutting back in. So if I was to look at here, this comes forward this way, right? This comes forward the same way. Lower lip follows that angle. Chin follows that angle. So you see that projection of that angle coming forward, here to here, turn sideways. I'll go like this. So it's here, to here, to here, to here. All right? And then the slope of the forehead on that as well. So anything that's projecting, coming forward is going to grab light. Light, light, lower lip, light, chin, light. There you go. So anything that's moving back in is going to be the shadow or your value point. Now, if I look at the width of the nose, single finger, right? That's a pretty good indicator. Gives you that width, right? And then left and right side here. So if I look at my nose here, this is 4 fingers coming down this way. So if I create that structure of that trapezoid coming down here and drop that in the shadow, that creates that structure of that value change right there. Okay. Now, upper lip. So you have this portion here coming down. That drops down on a slight angle. It is projecting back in. That's the value right here. Lower lip comes forward, projects out, and then directly underneath that lower lip is a value change here. So lower lip is basically illuminated. I'm going to keep it that way. So if you deal with shape of light and shadow, I'm going to drop the chin line down a little bit lower just to get a little bit more into here. Like so. Pull those back, get some structure here. Now, coming into the socket of the eye, right? So the eye is working on a curve this way and this way. That's your brow line right there. You get that high point of that curve coming up. And there's my brow. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to push that in as a value change. And then the same thing here as a value change. So if I drop that in, creates that structure, that value change right there. Gives you a little bit more spatial depth, right? Just that structured light and shadow. Understanding that. So if that's the bridge of the nose, that's a highlight. So if this is the forehead, so I'm going to bring this up a little bit higher into here. And then I want to bring that up just a little bit higher. So you can always, nice thing about drawing is that by making marks, all those marks that you establish, they become very important. They become structural lines within the drawing, and leave them because it's your thought process, and that's what's going down. You're thinking your way through problem solving, looking at the form in front of you. It's a great thing to do. Now, so if I look at this side here, I can pull that down and I can grab that light coming through here. All right, so now I've established and created a cheekbone on either side of that form just by light illumination. And then through here, I've also created the forehead, highlight, the nose, that's a highlight right there. The lower lip, that's a highlight area here, and then the chin. All right. So the jawline is also illuminated, so keep that jawline light. So if I look to the underside here, I get a strong shadow of value change here. So if I do this here, and then come down this way, directly underneath the chin here, I create the structure of that value change here. And I can also see that sternum-mastoid muscle wraps around here. So if I look at that, this muscle has a much stronger curve to it. So I'm going to break it off in that straight line and pull it in this way, as well as here, get that to come around. And then coming down into here, into the clavicle. I'm going to put a value change in there, and then I can always grab light and pull light back out around that form. Now, left and right side here, temporal lobe. So cheekbone pushes out here, right? This goes in. So I'm just going to do a reverse curve here and allow this to come out around this way. So on this side here, above the ear, that's a value change. do the same thing here, just do a reverse curve and a value change on that side. Because the side of the head is compressing right there. So that helps you to see that pull in coming off to the side. So now, if I look at the ear, it's behind the hair, projecting out, comes down into here, jawline comes down, moves around this way. Get that jawline to kick out a little bit more this way, and then back down into the structure of the chin here. So now, structure of the hair. So if this is the brow line, that's your hairline right here. So if I'm looking at this point here, center, right? Widow's peak comes back in this way. All right, so the hair comes down. So now you're looking at this. So you got to look at the hair in terms of the structure, form, and volume. That's a volume here. So if I go from center point here and I look at that shape, I come down and around here, and then I pull that back out again, and I see this volume coming this way, and it's also compressing and coming back in here. So if I push that dark in, that takes this, elevates that element of light here, and on center this way. I can come back into there, creates the volume structure of that hairline. Now directly underneath it here, I get this light that comes up into here, and then directly underneath, that's a stronger value change. So it creates that wave structure or form, right? So you get to see this coming around into here onto the side, and then I'm going to do it as a value change here. And then if I pull this light with that hair through there like that, that gives that edge that looks like it's coming towards me. And if I do a dark into here, that's directly underneath that hairline. That pushes back. Now the hair is in front. So the explanation behind that is that deeper value changes recede, lights come forward, and then you have a middle ground value change. All right. So when you're looking at that, you look at light as being a foreground, gray tone as being your middle ground, and your intense dark as being your background. All right. And that gives you high contrast to your drawing and allows you to see form, spatial depth, spatial proportion, which is hugely important. So I look at this point here. This is coming down. I have that value change into here because this is coming up and over, and I do have some areas that are into here and back into there. So I can pull in those value changes, and then I can grab the light around that. So that light comes forward, and that value change goes back. So it gives you a sense of spatial depth and proportion going that way. Now, back into here. So if I look at this hairline, this comes down and over this form here, and then sweeps back this way, compresses into here, compresses back, does that. So I want to grab that, and I'll show that as a light with so that hair is coming down here. Grab a light here. Much darker dark coming into here. This way. Pushes that back. Now I still have this side here directly underneath, right above the ear. An indentation. That's the structure of that hairline. You can see the ear popping up through there. I see a bit of a gray tone here. So separating that gray tone from that dark, I can do a light there. So I've got the gray tone, got the light, got that dark. So you're balancing off the structure of light and shadow and dark in relationship to form in volume, spatial depth. Allows you to see all that. Now, come here, this point here, kind of gives me that value change here, value change here, and this is light back into here, picking up that one. So it gives you a little bit more of a layered look. So I'm looking at the hair form as being a volumetric form. And I'm trying to establish that through the structure of light and shadow, as well as line contour. So if I look at this area right here, I push that in a little bit. That gives me a value change at this point. I look at the light off that nose. That comes down this way, and that tip of that nose, that light comes forward here. So depending on how you're viewing the structure of that nose, if I'm looking down, that light curves and comes forward. Okay. So at this point here, that's the tip of that nose right there. The nostril comes back this way and comes back into here. That's the insert of that nostril, the nasal cavity, that way. So if I put that dark in, then you can see what's happening there. You got the light, you got your value change, you got your intense dark, right? Foreground, middle ground, background. Now, like I said, if that nostril is coming in here, and that's the curvature of that form here, this is light and illuminated, but on the side of that, it's in shadow. Pushing that. So by pushing that value change off to the side there, that allows that bridge of that nose to come forward even more. Greater sense of form and volume, structure. So as you build the drawing, you build as a line contour drawing, and then as you establish that drawing, you start establishing structure of your value changes. And so those value changes are structures of light and shadow, and the light and shadow moves around form. So whatever the shape of that form is, whatever that contour is going to be reflected in the shape of that shadow. So if that's a ball form to that nose, that side or that shadow shape becomes a curve. That light becomes a curve, and that shadow becomes a curve. So the eraser, as well as the pencil, is a really important drawing tool, right? Because you got to be able to push back and forth between the white of the page and the dark of the charcoal. And how hard you press on that form or using the charcoal becomes really important too. So you can build value changes on top. So it's not a good idea to go dark very quickly, but lay up your softer value changes. Grab that structure of light and shadow, see how that comes down here. So I can see where that pulls back onto the side. So I got a value change behind the nose, all right? But coming off the side of the face here into that cheek, that's light coming down that way. Now, like I said, if I look at the nostril to the eye socket, so if I come up here, that's where my eye socket is. So that's a pretty good indicator, right? Now, if I look at the split line of the mouth here, this part comes forward, that goes back. So I can push that a little bit darker. All right, so that split line, darker, right? So if that's the corner structure of the mouth, I know that center point of the eye and center point of the eye is there, right? Comes down this way, center line, nostril to tear duct to nostril, center of the eye, corner of the mouth. So that's here, center line, corner of the mouth, and here, center of the eye, corner of the mouth. Tear duct to nostril. So that gives you a pretty good read on that form right there. So far, scale and proportion, this is starting to show up. From this compression, since I'm looking down and viewing it, it looks like the chin's dropping down, so we get a shortness or a foreshortening to the neck as well, which is fine. So viewpoint, and as you're seeing it, doing observational drawing. You just got to pay attention to what's in front of you. So these rules of structure are sort of like mapping, if you will. Laying it out as that sort of like two-dimensional grid with your points. Just allows you to see where you are, keeps you in touch with the structure of that drawing so you don't get lost while you're working directly from observation. Now, so with this here, I got to get the curvature of this eye coming into here, and then I'm coming down this way, into here, and into here. Corner, right? Looks like a cat's eye, right? That split line. Sorry. So scale and proportion, balance that out. So that tear duct coming in is going to be slightly darker coming into here. So that pulls that inside corner in a little bit deeper, and it starts to allow you to see a form and volume as you structure that eye. So the size of the eye is said to be the size of a golf ball. So all you're seeing is just that end, right? The cap to the end of the sphere that's projecting through the lid, all right? Which means that the lid is working over a sphere. So if you look at the lids on center, they're illuminated, right? Because they're projecting out. So that's something to remember. So if I drop light here, and then down here, and down here, on center, that allows that form to start to curve out. Like I said, lights come forward, darks recede. So if that's a darker dark here, this is a middle ground value, and that's your light. So if I come into here, and I push this volume of that value change, that concave into here, and if I follow this down this way, here, that allows me to press that back in. Now I look to the other side, and I'm seeing that it's a tighter curve coming into here, coming up and over. This one. Gives me that value change into here. And that gives me that light, and then the light coming out to this portion of the structure of the eye right there. So I want to grab that eyebrow here, and then eyebrow here. Pull light up that way. So wherever I see this light, so here is changing a little bit, change that contour. I'm going to put a little bit more shadow in here. That gets me underneath, throws the value change down onto the forehead, creates a sensation of spatial depth as that form moves back. And then if I come in just a little bit deeper here, underneath, just on that contour, it really defines that line contour there and allows this hair element to lift up. Like so. Now, so if I'm to look at the pupil of the eye on center, upper and lower lid, that's where it's located. So if that's my lid here, and this is a circle, So sets that eye back even stronger, right? So you can see that higher contrast coming off of that drawing. And then I'm going to take this portion around the pupil, illuminate that. It's going to help that. So on the center, as we get into the structure of that pupil, I'm going to go a little bit darker with that in the middle. So that darker dark, now that portion of the eye becomes a value change. The pupil is really dark. Now if I look at this, I get a lid line here, coming out from here. I want to go deeper. Here. So it's always a good thing to have a number of sharp pencils with you, because these charcoal pencils, if you press too hard, they do crumble and break. So a couple of different erasers, and what's nice about the variety of erasers is that you can take your utility blade and you can also shape them, right? So if I want to create a finer edge to pull that light out, I can do that, right? Or if it's directly underneath here, to come back in with that eraser underneath here, it gives me that structure, that lower lid. That light to that gray tone allows you to see a greater sense of form and volume coming in. So you're always going to have that structure balance of light and shadow throughout the whole drawing. That's going to give you form and volume. That's going to give you overlay of structure over a form, like the eyelid over the eyeball. Now, so this hair to the left is casting a huge amount of shadow through here. So I'm just going to come through here with a value change like this. And I'm going to go deeper towards the inside. That eye socket in here. Press that even more. Now, I also see that this light breaks through this way, here to here, and comes down like this. And I also see that that light wraps around like so into there. You see what I mean? So I got that value change, I got that shade into here, and I can go a little bit deeper because that's being cast by the hair here over the eye socket. So with that, I can also create that illumination here, and I can get that to be even more intense here as that structure of that brow. Now there's probably like a light change here. Coming up like that. Gives me a little bit more, and then a little bit more light, softer coming in here. Gives me the structure of that eye socket, and then I can do a little bit more definition. Line contour, hair onto that brow, split line coming down this way. So I got a stronger light from this side because there's one light source coming in, illuminating. So this side's in shadow. So I can come down this way, create a value change here, coming off of that, and then grab this light here. Gives me that sort of like split line, a little bit more structure. So you're constantly working back and forth in structure of light and shadow all the time. So the whole thing is, if you drag your hand across the page, you're going to get a value change. So you always got to remember that, you know, working back into that drawing, if your palm of your hand is down, probably going to intensify it. So if I go darker underneath the lid here and here, that pushes that lid back, and then I can grab some more light here. But you need that value change that I put down in order to pull out that light illumination of that form. So if I pull my hair back, I got a different form and value happening in there. So I can go a little bit more here, grab a little bit more light. So depending on what that outcome is, structure of light and shadow, position of form, hair coming down, we can do that. Got a lot going on with it all the time. So I have a slight sideburn hair coming in here. That pulls in onto the side this way. And then I can grab that structure here, pulls that cheekbone out. Now, as I come around into here, contour line comes back out, and that earlobe comes in right around there. A little flap of skin right here before you go into that inner ear canal. This becomes a value change onto the side here, with that being lit there. The earlobe is illuminated, that's projecting out. Get a value change underneath that lobe here. And then I have this structure of shadow, which gets you towards the inner ear. Like so. And then also into here. And then this is light and illuminated here. Tip of that ear coming down around the lobe. So now I got a compression of the side of that ear coming out. A little bit more light here. And then another value change at this point here. That way. And then another point coming down here. So that looks pretty good. And then I want this outer portion of that ear to pop out a little bit more, grab a little bit more light here. So I can pull that out this way. That comes down. I'm going to get this value change to pull in here. So now I got that projection of the flaps of the ears moving out. It gives a nice structure to the ear, to the side of the head. But just remember, since anything that's projecting out is going to grab light. So anything behind that light, you might want to press it darker just to get that to move back in behind the form, and that pushes that back. Get a little push out here with the tuft of hair underneath, but that's going to help you to see that form. So I want this to come up and over, and I will work and redefine the structure of this hair as I'm doing this. Things change and get back into the drawing and start pushing it a little bit more. So the thing you have to remember about drawing is that it just takes time. It's all observational work. You don't get everything all at once, but you try to get the structure and the form down. So once you establish that overall drawing of that portrait, you can completely start working back into it and put more detail and definition into that drawing as you start working it. So if I look to here, that hairline comes in this way, and then a bit of that sideburn element coming down into here, just like on the other side. Structure of that ear comes from behind here, and then that lobe comes out this way, comes into here. I got that flap of skin here, that's illuminated, and then coming down into this point, up like this. Follow that shape that's going into that inner ear canal. So that's dark, so I can push that through. and then directly underneath here, I would push that a little bit darker just underneath that ear point here, and that's going to push that back. Now, this portion here, the jawline is always projecting out, all right? Coming down here, right below the structure of that cheek line, this is working on a curve in here, so you have a shape that looks kind of like this. So if I take that and then push that back as a value change, and then follow this through onto a curve this way, and then also coming through here, like so. This comes back in, illuminate that jawline so you can see that that value change is subtle, coming in along the side of the face here. Do the same thing here. Allow this cheekbone to come out even more this way. I want to get this to drop down like that. So, the lower that shadow is, the stronger the cheekbone. You see what I mean? That's a projected form. That's a little bit more compressed and seeing more of this side here, where this comes down and here, and then following through on that jawline right there. So if I look at the shape of shadow directly underneath the lip here, as this projects through, it does this shape here. So I'll go a little bit darker underneath that bottom lip. And then coming up into here, just a little bit more shadow here, coming down like so. And then what happens here, that upper lip, that projects out on top. So that's the value change here. The nostril is light. We got to be able to establish that line contour around the nostril. So that's a little bit darker. So that gives you a little bit more definition. And if we press coming into that nostril even deeper, that pushes that back. I'm going to grab this light here and here directly underneath. So the thing to remember is that the bottom of the nose is in front of the nostril. So that's a line projecting on a diagonal. So you got to look at that diagonal there and there. Okay? So it's here. Look at this, projected back, this is coming forward. So the way to do that is that transition of that line contour becomes hugely important on that diagonal going back, and then also the structure of light and shadow. Okay? So if I create the ball of this nose and illuminate that, that comes forward, and that shadow point is going down and away from you, and then we get a little bit here as a shadow coming in this way, but we still want to create the volume of the nose and create that structure of the sphere of the nostril as well as the tip of the nose, and incorporate that shadow point coming in. This has a little bit more light here as well as here. That's going to help that form. And you get a little bit of reflective light underneath that, like so, and it allows the tip of that nose to come forward and then drop that structure, that value change directly underneath the nose. And that's going to push that back and allow that tip of that nose to start coming towards the viewer. So if I come into here and press that back like so, and like so, I go a little bit stronger here. Like that. And I start playing with the contour there, as well as the nostril, getting that to work. Shape of shadow. shape of light. Bounce onto that. I look at the lower lip. It's a little bit lighter in front on center, darker onto the side. So if I press that back here, and press that back this way, so that lip goes back, and I got a light transition between this point here and the structure of that upper lip. Bring that down just a little bit thinner, coming into here and into here, gives you a nicer transition. And then the corner of that mouth is here and here. And darker line contour creating the split line. And keeping that lower lip illuminated. And the value change to the side here. And then coming back in, following that shape of light, gives me the structure of that chin. Here into the jawline. So now I'll go back onto this eye here, onto the right side. I have a heavier brow line coming in. This is lighter here. And a stronger contour with the lid here. Press that in as a value change. Then I can work back into that. Start controlling the weight of that shadow line with the light illumination of the eraser. Now I'm going to come into the corner of the eyes, outer corner of the eyes, and go dark. That pushes that back and really allows you to see the form and volume, the structure of the sphere of that eye coming forward. It's down below. And I want to grab that light illumination for that lower lid here. That helps me to see that. And then I look down below that. And I got a value change here. So a little bit with the eraser. Coming back in. Pull that light back up. And if I grab that darker contour to the inside, and I can see the light illumination, that interchange coming down. I got that light here. That gives me a little bit more structure here, and then I pull that light form this way, comes back down into the side of the face there. It still gives me that shadow here on the bridge of the nose. This gives me a little bit more coming in, and then a little bit deeper into that pocket and pushes that back just a little bit more. So I get the ears, the eyes, the nose, the upper lip, the lower lip, the structure of the hair. And we're getting closer now, right? So I have this shirt line that comes over, tucks behind the neck here. The side drops down a little bit lower this way. That has a stitched edge to it for the collar. And then this way, it's over here, coming down into here. Where this neckline comes down back into here, I just want to go dark towards the inside. So that dark pushes that back. You see what I mean? So that looks like that shirt collar, even though it's a black shirt, you still got to pay attention to the structure of light and shadow because you're not dealing with pigmentation, right? You're dealing with light and shadow on these forms. So I look at this neckline here. That comes down this way. You go a little bit darker underneath the chin here. This one. So if I press that value change closer to the chin and then pull it down softer, I can get the structure of that shadow to work for me. Illumination on the jawline, sternum, mastoid muscle here, a little bit lighter and brighter, and then coming down this way, where that comes in. If I grab a value change into here, I can press that back, and then I can grab the light coming off the structure of that shoulder, right? Coming down this way. That's your value change into here. Like so. So then I have some skin directly underneath the neck. So if I look at this coming up this way, I can grab a little bit more light here, and that comes down like so. And then on the interior of that form, I got a value change happening in here. Bright with the light coming this way, and then value change coming down into there, a little bit softer. Yeah, it's a little bit darker up into here, structured light and shadow. I'll press that in a little bit more into there. Coming down. So the weight of that shadow and the weight of this light coming into here. And then it drops down again into here. That one. If I look at to this side here, that projection sternomastoid muscle is lighter here. I'm going to come down this way. I'm going to grab that value change here. Press that in. So there's a couple different ways to go. If you don't want to rub with your finger, you can use a paper towel. That's a very effective way to go too. Just things that you have handy with you. And you can create the structure, the weight of those value changes. With that, you can also get a better blend. And then I can grab my light through here, pull this down, and this opens back up here this way. And then this opens back up into here as well. So it gives me a fullness to that neck. I got to grab a little bit more light coming out from here. That way gives me the shoulder and the value change. Shirt collar. Pay attention to elliptical shape. I think it's important. You can pull that dark around a little bit more here and here. And then when it comes down to the center, just like anything else working off the center, even the center of that shirt line, it's going to be more illuminated. Tops of the shoulders are going to be light as they project out this way. So as much detail and definition as you can see. Put that in. Work that structure, light and shadow. So as you drop that dark into here, it pushes that back. You lay that light right in here, and then it starts to bring that back forward again. So you start seeing the curvature to the neck working around the form as well. I see this jawline here. I just want to go a little bit darker coming into here. So a little bit more definition that way. And then I grab more light coming down here, and then the light off that jawline. And then a little bit more illumination coming out of here. So effectiveness of that background. Shadows are good for you to see that moving back into space. So let's work on the structure of the hair a little bit more. So as I look at this here, so however that's going to fall or drop, if that's a natural fall point there, I look at this and I go, all right, so I want to get more light coming out here. And then up to that point here, I want to get more shadow coming into here behind that. I have a light illumination coming right through here, like that. And then coming out the back here, I have shadow or value change there. And then I have the light illumination breaking this way, and then value change back into here, pushing that through. So as this comes around into here, pay attention to line contour, because that can really help you to establish the movement of that form as well. And if there's some darker darks pulling through there, and then you got those lights coming up next to them, that's going to allow you to see more spatial depth and separation of that hair structure coming out. And I look back directly underneath here, and I go, yeah, that's darker into here. Coming down this way, like so. And there's probably a shadow or value change coming off of this side of the head here, dropping in, and then probably have a light there coming forward, which allows you to see that and gives you more spatial depth in relationship to that form. Now when I look at where the hair comes from here, I want to come up and over this way and then down like so. Push that up. So that center split line, a little bit darker, a little bit more intense. So that helps you to see that strand coming forward, that dark to this light to that dark here. And then when this comes up and over here, more light coming up that way. A little bit more light here. And then as it comes back into these recess points here, you can go darker. And like I said, pull from those darks back into that light illumination. And like I said, also build up on those value changes. Maybe get an intense dark pour that with a light as well. And that's going to help you to see that form. And so if there's a gray tone to a dark, drop a light in next to that as well. So that dark reconnects back into here, to the forehead, and that light illumination starts to come forward. And center on this here, pick up on more light coming down. And then right above the brow line here, coming down into here. Structure of that cheek. Just go back into it, rework it with the eraser, pull up on all those lights as well. I like to do the separation, keeping that light here, because there is no line contour. You might see a structure of that value change coming up this way a little bit, so you can push that. It might make it look like a seam line, but it's not really, so that's coming in here like that. But that keeps a fullness to that lower lip really alive for you. So you don't lose that. So you don't lose the compression. It doesn't look like it's drawn on or pasted on. A little bit more shadow into there. That will help that. And then coming back down into here. Like so. And then also here, allows you to see that, pushes that back, and I can go a little bit darker back into here. And then if you want, you can get structure of somewhat hair follicles coming down, right? You got to lighten that up just a little bit in front, but make sure that those darks definitely push back out into those little corner areas and establish that. Okay? So that's the portrait drawing lesson. How to get in and out of a drawing portrait. Like I said, 4 fingers, right? Scale and proportion all the way through. And I pushed it up a little bit more, coming down into here, coming down into here. All right, so if I'm looking at this, 4 fingers here, from the ear coming across this way, that's in alignment, right? Tear duct here to the nostril, center of the eye, corner of the mouth. So that will get you in and out of the drawing portrait, and it'll really allow you to establish a structure and just the mapping of that form, so you can do these straight-on drawings looking into a mirror. All right, so that's the drawing lesson for self-portraits for tonight. Take care. Have a good evening.